Hello there, Drew Hanish, Whiskey Lore, and time for another whiskey tasting. Today, I am going to be heading to South Carolina to do a tasting. Of course, I live in South Carolina, so it's not a big, far jump, except the place that I'm getting the whiskey from is a good 3.5 hours from where I live. So it's on the other end of the state. And you may be going, what? Woodford Reserve? What are you talking about? Why do you have that bottle of Woodford Reserve Double Oaked here? I will get to that here in a moment as I describe this whiskey, Johnny Fever. And no, that is not this Johnny Fever. This Johnny Fever, I was in radio a long time ago. I've been going through and watching these old episodes again. Great show from the late 70s, early 80s. I don't know about the second version that came out with Tawny Katane, but the originals are amazing, and these videos actually are pretty well done from a standpoint that they didn't get the rights to all the music. So there are some things like, if anybody's seen the Thanksgiving episode, there's a point where Mr. Carlson, the boss, comes walking into the studio, and Johnny is the DJ, and he is sitting back, and Dogs by Pink Floyd is playing. Well, they don't play Dogs by Pink Floyd in this because they couldn't get the rights for it, because Pink Floyd's a stickler for that. But instead, they had some other band create something with dogs barking, and it actually didn't distract me as much as I thought it might. But anyway, great show, but that's not the Johnny Fever that we're talking about here. The Johnny Fever that inspired this particular bottle of whiskey is actually father-in-law of Billy Watterson, who is one of the two founders of the Burnt Church Distillery. They came down from Ohio. They set up, found a great location right near Hilton Head, started to build out this distillery, and actually, interestingly enough, one of my old clients from the web design world became the general manager there. And so it was really interesting when Chris emailed me and said, hey, I am actually now at a distillery, and isn't it interesting that you're now doing stuff about whiskey? And I have had a lot of fun chatting back and forth with him and making that transition from web into doing tastings of whiskey. Now, Johnny Fever, I have tasted this in two different iterations. The first iteration, it was a lower proof. It's now 100 proof. I think it was like 97 something back then. And that was still probably a bit younger version of the whiskey. And the idea behind this is that Billy's father-in-law was a fan of Woodford Reserve. And so when it came time to say, let's create a whiskey, he said, okay, well, maybe let's try to do something that would remind you in a way maybe of Woodford Reserve. So what I've done today in this tasting is I've kind of looked at it from the Woodford Reserve angle to see what the differences are between these two whiskeys. Now, one of the major differences that's going to come out of this, both of these were manufactured in Kentucky as far as I know, because Johnny Fever, I believe, was sourced from the Jephthah Creed distillery, because Burnt Church is distilling and they have their distillate being put away, but it has not yet reached maturity. So they have been using and sourcing from other distilleries. Another difference in this is that this is a rye and wheat mash bill. So it's got both of those in it, as well as corn and malted barley. And then this is going to be just a corn whiskey with rye in it and malted barley. And the other thing is that this is partially triple distilled, because they have those 3 beautiful pot stills, now 6 beautiful pot stills at the distillery. And so they take some of that whiskey and then they blend it with whiskey that they've made in Louisville off of a column still. So it's a combination of the two. Then they put the whiskey into a first barrel, then they put it into a second barrel. This, as far as I know, is only getting the treatment in 1 barrel. So my thought on this is already probably going to be a little less on the woody side, which in my case would probably be a plus. We'll see. Double Oaked is not overly woody for me. To me, it actually is really nicely done from that standpoint. my personal opinion on Double Oaked, I know people love this whiskey. My opinion on it is that it's probably a little too mild for me. I like something, if I was looking for just an easy drinker, yes, that's the whiskey. But for my personal taste, I always like to be a little bit more challenged on my whiskeys. And so I don't tend to reach for the Double Oaked as much as other people might do. Again, not saying it's a bad whiskey. It is not a bad whiskey. It's a very quality whiskey. It's just, I have to be in the mood for it, and I'm not in the mood for it very often. This is a 2.5-year-old bottle, so it's gotten some use, but probably more from other people visiting me than from me myself. So, all right, let's go in and do a nosing and tasting on Johnny Fever. And right off the bat, there's a bit of an herbal character to this, probably coming from that rye. Some baking spice. I get a little hazelnut kind of a note from the wood. Now, when I did a side-by-side comparison of this with Double Oaked, this was a lot more fragrant than Double Oaked. So you could say it's a little more aggressive on the nose. There is a slight, when you're doing the nosing back and forth between the two, sort of a, I said paint thinner. That was, I don't want to say that in a negative way, but there's a bit of a higher alcohol scent that is on this particular whiskey. The oak surrounds it, though. They did a really good job of getting that oak scent in there. Not sure how, in terms of their aging of this whiskey, that they pulled that off. But it could be the fact that these barrels have been sitting in South Carolina, down near the beach, where it's a little bit more humid, where it gets really hot in the summertime. That is possibly the reason for that. Cheers. Again, the rye kind of stands out there a bit. Caramel comes in. It really dries out towards the end. You get, again, kind of this herbally sense. You get some tannins coming in, a little bit of a tannin coming in, a little bit of a cola note towards the end. Just a little bit of bitterness from the barrel, but just a little. It is not as char heavy as what Double Oaked is once you get to the end. And once it hits the palate, it's actually a little bit sweeter. The caramel actually gives you a bit more of a sweet note. So if they're trying to nail it perfectly, they're definitely not nailing it perfectly. What I would say is that this whiskey is actually a little bit more expressive to me than Woodford Reserve Double Oaked is. But if you're looking for a mild drinking experience, that's going to win. If you're looking to explore a little bit more, this is going to win. Where the two are probably going to split is that I think the last price I saw on Johnny Fever was around $90, $95, somewhere in that range. Whereas Double Oaked, you're going to get probably around, the $50 range, I think. When I bought that, 45 to 50 back in the past. I haven't looked at it recently, so that's going to be part of the difference. But honestly, if I have both bottles in my cabinet, I have to say I'd probably be grabbing the Johnny Fever more often, only because, as I say, it's got a little bit more of a challenging profile to it. And it's one of those whiskeys that I keep my eye on, because if I'm thinking it's pretty good right now, what's it going to be after it's had some time, or will it end up becoming a lot more oaky? That's one of those things about new distilleries. You kind of, roll with it. Plus, what happens when they start getting distillate out of their own distillery? What kind of changes is that going to bring? Because it's going to be under different conditions than the way that it's being distilled right now. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have tasted Johnny Fever, what are your thoughts? Have you been to Burnt Church? It's a beautiful distillery. If you're heading to Hilton Head to go play golf or go to the beach or whatever you may be doing, that is a great place to stop off on your way down. And definitely something you can learn a bit about the local history. They've done a really nice job with that, and you can learn where that name Burnt Church comes from, or go back and listen to my interview with Chris Crow, where I was tasting the older version of Johnny Fever. Thank you so much. Subscribe if you want to watch more of these down the road. And until next time, cheers and Slainte.